Good morning in New York, a good day in all the other world regions. I am Irene Gina Reichel. I'm here on behalf of the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, an NGO that I co-founded a few years ago, and that works on supporting women active in sustainable energy through mentoring and networking, and also on transforming the energy sector to make it more inclusive. I would like to give tribute to the Global Initiative for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights for putting together this beautiful side event entitled Women's Empowerment for a Sustainable World towards a Gender-Just Transition. I believe this is a very worthwhile topic. We all know that involving women in all kinds of decision-making and societal undertakings brings great benefits to everybody. Yet at the same time, we know that women continue to face significant gender-based discrimination. And while it is an issue of social progress and well-being to include women more broadly, it is also an issue of human rights. And I think the Global Initiative needs to be credited to have brought this element of the human rights dimension of the nexus between SDG 5 and SDG 7 into the limelight. The Global Initiative has also managed to enlist for this side event a wide range of stakeholders, both from the governmental side and from the private sector and civil society. So I believe we are in for a very interesting conversation. And the conversation will really be about the question how the energy transition that we all need to embark on in all regions of the world if we want to reach climate goals, if that energy transition can also be an opportunity to advance women, to make progress on the empowerment of women, on the equality between women and men. So we will have two rounds of conversations around this topic with very interesting experts whom I will introduce in a minute. But before we enter into the substance of our debate, if I might say, we are very happy to have with us a number of very senior colleagues from the diplomatic service. And I would like, without further ado, to invite Mr. Hans Almoslechner, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Austrian Mission in New York, to give us some welcoming words. Please.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Reichel, dear Irene. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Austria to this event on women's empowerment for a sustainable world towards a gender-just transition that we are glad to co-host with the Global Initiative for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, as well as Germany and Costa Rica. While we have seen undeniable progress in the field of gender equality in past decades in many fields and ways, it is also a fact that women and girls continue to face violations of their human rights on a daily basis. Before I will mention climate crisis specific aspects, let me briefly speak about the situation women and girls in Ukraine are facing these days. Russia's war against Ukraine is a flagrant violation of international law that leads to an unbelievable suffering for civilians, in particular women and girls. We condemn Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine in the strongest possible terms, which grossly violates international law and the UN Charter and undermines international security and stability. We demand that Russia immediately cease its use any further unlawful threat or use of force. I would like to express Austria's full solidarity with the people of Ukraine, in particular the courageous Ukrainian women and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, the current climate crisis is reinforcing existing gender inequalities, as well as just disproportionate exposure to socioeconomic vulnerabilities of women and girls. Yet at the same time, addressing gender equality as a vital part of climate action can contribute as well as mutually strengthen both objectives. Achieving gender equality and promoting effective climate policy measures and human rights are the compass that must guide a gender-responsive green transition. Austria has taken a number of efforts to promote women's and girls' participation and leadership in the context of climate change. A national focus lies on the empowerment of women and girls in technology and innovation to ensure they equally benefit from job opportunities and at the same time increase diversity in those currently male-dominated sectors. For example, in the STEM field, Austria recently launched a new call for funding for projects as well as femtech internships for female students. Further activities such as the Girls' Day or the Mint Girls Challenge focus on raising awareness and supporting non-traditional career choices for girls. Within the framework of the gender mainstreaming strategy, Austria has set itself the goal of taking into account the different life situations and interests of people of all genders in all decisions and at all levels of society. This goal is also reflected in the impact goals of the current national budget plan for the area of energy, climate, and the environment. One of the impact goals is the empowerment of women in environmental and climate action, as well as in the energy sector. We strongly believe that gender equality and women empowerment is a prerequisite for securing the resilience of societies overall. Therefore, women's and girls'
frozen, Hans.
I'm sorry, do you?
Yeah, it works again. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. We sometimes have internet connection problems at the mission. As I was saying, I'm looking forward to fruitful discussions amongst the renowned experts present, and I'm sure that they will enlighten us about ways and possibilities on how to manage the gender-just transition towards a climate-neutral world. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this welcoming message, and not just the welcoming words, but also the substantive content of your message. Might I then turn to Ms. Karin Goebel, who is Minister at the German Mission to the United Nations, and ask her for her introductory statement.
Yes, good morning to everybody, and thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the side event. And at the outset, I would like to fully support what my Austrian colleague has just said on the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenge of climate change can only be addressed with a broad social, economic, and technical transformation. Accelerating the energy transition is key to reach our climate goals and also to ensure energy security. Making this transition more inclusive and increasing participation of underrepresented groups is a socio-political imperative. At the same time, it is also necessary for the success of the energy transition. For the profound transformation ahead of us, we need all perspectives, all skills and talents to develop the necessary ideas and solutions. As we are driving forward the energy transition, we have the opportunity to also drive forward gender equality. And we will use this opportunity by increasing women's participation in green jobs and the equal and meaningful inclusion in all decision-making processes regarding climate and energy policy. In 2018, the G7 members committed to the Equal by 30 campaign, aiming to work towards equal pay equal leadership and equal opportunities for women in the energy sector by 2030. Last year, the G7 expanded the focus of the Equal by 30 public sector principles to a broader intersectional approach in advancing gender equality and diversity in the energy sector, to show continued leadership and to take further action to build a more inclusive and equitable workforce. As you might know, Germany holds this year's G7 presidency, and we will drive this agenda forward. We want to take stock of actions taken by G7 members and exchange best practice examples on how to promote gender equality and diversity in the energy sector. Let me emphasize, strengthening gender equality is one of the priorities of our presidency this year, not only in the energy sector. Our goal is to promote an intersectional approach with regard to gender equality and take the links between different forms of inequality and discrimination into account. It is important in this regard to continue to advance gender equality in the G7 countries, to integrate it as a key value in our global commitment to sustainable development, and to promote it in a targeted manner. Civil society is a very important actor in international climate and energy policy, and of course also in advancing gender equality. Public demands were central to the increase in ambition that we have achieved over the last years. Therefore, it is crucial for us to also engage in dialogue with civil society groups in our G7 presidency, including the Women 7 network. There's a persisting gender imbalance, especially with regard to economic participation and opportunity. In the energy sector, like in many other sectors, we are far from gender equality. Therefore, achieving genuine equality for women requires continued efforts at all levels. Today's event brings together different stakeholders, policymakers, experts, and representatives of civil society. By bringing together these different perspectives, we can exchange openly on how to make the transformation ahead of us more inclusive. Before I conclude, I would like to quote Foreign Minister Baerbock, who said in her video message on the occasion of the general debate at the CSW, "Equal representation is necessary at all levels. That is the signal this conference must send out. We want the women of this world to be able to embrace their future without fear, but with confidence, whether they live in the drought-hit area of the Sudan, in flood-struck regions of Bangladesh, or in the midst of war-torn Mariupol in East Ukraine. It's our joint responsibility to fight this battle for them and for us." Lastly, I would like to thank the organizers and the co-hosts for today's meetings, and I wish all of us a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goebel, for this welcoming message and your substantive remarks. We now enter into the two questions that we want to discuss during our time together. The first question is really to assess a little bit the current state of affairs when it comes to the nexus between SDG 5 and SDG 7. And we know from groundbreaking studies that IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, for example, has done, that the participation of women in sustainable energy, while it is a bit higher than the participation of women in traditional energy, oil and gas, is still quite low. At best, it's a third, and that is counting all the administrative posts that women often inhabit. And when we look at leadership positions, the percentage is much lower. And when we look at STEM functions, the percentage is also much lower. In the first time that we spend together, we want to explore a little bit why that is so and why this is not a good thing, in our view, I assume. And I will have this conversation with a list of very impressive experts. Titi Sontoro, Executive Director, Aksi for Gender, Social and Climate Justice. Rosa Pavanelli, Secretary General of Public Service International, Ana Victoria Rojas, Senior Gender, Energy and Environment Specialist, Dr. Linda Davis, whom I don't see right now. Where? Yes, she's here. The CEO of Giraffe Bioenergy Limited, and Sandra Caballero, Program Manager, Women at the Forefront at Sea for All. So it's a very competent panel, eminent experts that we have here, but it's also quite a diverse panel in terms of the regions that are represented. So perhaps I'll start asking you, Titi, if I may, from the point of view of where you are working, what's the situation of women? What role do women play in the energy field?
Thank you, Irene, for the questions. That's difficult, but also easy to answer. You know, it is a dilemma because the question is, what women? Are we talking about experts or we talk about grassroots women? So the grassroots women, even they are not aware that climate change is actually human-made trigger. You know, many places in Indonesia, even the governments of Indonesia told us that in 2050, Indonesia will lose about 2,000 islands. We have 70,000 islands, but still 2,000 islands is a big number. So it means
because of the sea level rise.
Sea level rise. And then many places already affected by the sea level rise, but the local government will say, you know, this is a natural disaster. You cannot avoid it, you know, because it's like God's willing. So the question is, if we talk about women at the grassroots level, local women, then they are not aware, you know. So how we can expect that they think about energy transition without rigorous political building, leadership training for women to realize, you know, this is climate change, then we need to contribute to change the situations and what women can do based on their localities. And so that's the general situations if we talk about the grassroots women. So if we want to have a gender just transition, then actually we need to talk with them, because then what kind of idea they see that they can improve their life because of the climate change and because we need to move to the energy transitions, you know. They don't see any alternative because we don't ask them. So the first thing is actually really, you know, talking to the women, but without leadership building, it will be difficult. If we expect.
So find a possibility, find a way of drawing them into the consultation, of making the transition more participatory.
Yes, yes, and involved in the decision making, because like in my country, it's still strong patriarchy cultures where women are at home, not in the public to make decisions. If they are invited into the public meetings, then they serve cakes and coffee, but not talking about what is actually the situations that they need to deal or what views they have.
Now I'm seeing interesting facial reactions from some of the participants here. For example, Linda, would you like to come in and you know, clearly you had some thoughts as Titi was speaking.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this meeting. Thank you for your comments. And I think I speak for a lot of women here that we have seen that kind of distribution where women are given you know, responsibilities that are well below their capabilities. So I speak from across the world here in Nairobi, in Kenya, that comment definitely resonates. Perhaps I can just speak a little bit about, you know, expanding or maybe defining what we mean by energy, right? Because automatically we think about lighting. So I want to maybe start to help us think through the household, and specifically a household in sub-Saharan Africa. And I speak from my home country of Kenya as well. So a household has some two basic buckets of energy requirements, and that is energy for lighting, as well as energy for cooking. And often when we think about energy, sometimes we automatically think about lighting. So I want to introduce the idea that the lack of clean cooking, clean, safe, affordable cooking fuel is a leading driver of women's inequality in sub-Saharan Africa, certainly in Kenya. And the exacerbation of climate change is one that makes this issue even worse. And I speak for this in terms of deforestation, right? Women rely on biomass, they rely on charcoal and firewood. Now the forests are depleting, so that work becomes even harder. When we talk about, you know, droughts, you know, sadly, Kenya is going through an awful drought. I'm thankful to the participants who condemned Ukraine and causing these global ripples in the energy prices. When we think about that woman in Africa, now when we have been trying to transition into clean energy, and LPG, liquid petroleum gas, is being touted as a solution that women in Africa can use instead of cutting down trees. Yes, it is a fossil fuel, but on the balance, we're saying, let's use fossil fuel, LPG as a transitional fuel. What has happened right now is the most vulnerable amongst us cannot afford LPG. They're being priced out of the market because the LPG pricing has gone a lot higher. So I think I've taken a little bit of advantage here, but I want to just put that conversation in our heads that energy comprises energy for lighting, energy for productive use, but very importantly, energy as a cooking resource. And that is where I see SDG 5 and SDG 7 coming together. We must address making cooking fuel clean, safe, affordable, and accessible.
And we have the statistic from the United Nations that the progress on clean cooking is inexistent. I mean, there's not only is there no progress, there is retrogression. And we are faced with a situation where about 3 billion of people will currently and in the foreseeable future will cook with unclean, unsafe, and ineffective fuels. And as you said, that is something that hampers the progress of women in these societies greatly, because they are simply tied down so badly with the provision of cooking. Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that. You know, I just want to conclude my comments perhaps by saying eating is a universal issue. Men and women eat. But for some reason, cooking is very squarely a women's issue. And sometimes, as you say very correctly, is we've retrogressed because it is seen as a women's issue. And in many parts of the world, women's issues have not risen to the point of significance. And I really liked the opening comments. It's a commercial aspect, you know. There are budget lines. People buy cooking fuel, right? So this is not a charity space. Providing clean, safe, affordable cooking fuel is a human right, and it also makes business sense to invest in this particular area. Climate change is not making it any better. It is making it absolutely dire for women and children in sub-Saharan Africa who are vulnerable to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. If I turn to you, Anna Victoria, what is your take on that?
I agree. I agree with Linda, and I think, and I know we're kind of derailing off your original question, but I cannot let go of this of the question. I absolutely agree that we do forget about the need to recognize cooking, and also the heating needs that energy provides. This is a conversation that falls off the table. And I want to, because I sit here with, being a Costa Rican who also holds a Dutch nationality and worked anyway in Africa and Asia. So I'm kind of conflicted and called upon to mention that this energy poverty and the problems of cooking with biomass are not only from developing countries. In Europe, we do have people that need to cook with biomass. We do have people that require biomass for their most basic heating needs. And it's not those people now in Ukraine, in war-torn Ukraine. They're also among the other European countries. And one of the conversations that we also need to, and that I'm very happy that's starting right now in Europe, is this recognition of energy poverty and how it is that the continent, particularly the European Union, can start providing decent services to these people who cannot afford this cooking. And the call is also to think about energy efficiency and what is the role that this efficiency can provide. When we start looking at the energy poverty, we see that it's mainly also the female-headed households that are falling off the rail. They're not the ones that are able to pay the bills. So what is it that can be done so that in terms of the services, we do not forget the population? And because the calls at the beginning were so harsh against, of course, the violence and the war against Ukraine right now, I'm wondering what it is that we can also do to start rethinking that energy taxonomy in the EU. I mean, we need to rethink the access to gas as a fuel, the access to other fossil fuels, and how we can make the transition in a manner that those people who are already living in energy poverty, who do not have the resources to have these solar panels, to invest in better efficiency at their homes, how is it that one can develop better policies to also cater for them? And in this, again, just don't want to lose out on the female face of poverty, which is unfortunately also a reality in this part of the world. And I think with that, I'll leave the floor for others, but I do think that when we're thinking about women's role in the energy sector, it is about the role as consumers as well as the role as part of the labor of the labor force. And in that, there are very, very different options that you can have also if you're going local on the ground and if you're going into utilities. And that is something that we can continue exploring in the next round of questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anna Victoria. Sandra, if I might turn to you, also taking up the cue that Anna gave us about women in the working world. What role have women played from your experience in a green transition, and how can the working environment, the working world help in empowering women in the energy transition?
Thank you, Irene, and thank you for the organizers for setting up this important conversation. I'm really happy that after years of being, trying to spread the message, it's finally, we finally have this kind of spaces to discuss it. So, well, I would like to bring up a very simple idea from your previous question, which would be that women's rights are human rights. So that's why we are talking about this right now. And regarding the role that women have played in the energy sector and in the energy transition, well, it depends on what kind of countries or region are we talking about, but in most of them, women have been left out of the decision-making positions. They have been left out of these very big processes and huge processes when the country is building a new law or a new paradigm for the energy transition. So I would say that women have been seen as beneficiaries of the energy transition, but sometimes we forget, we can think a lot about the barriers and the obstacles, but sometimes we forget to think about the opportunities that it brings. And I think that we need, what I would like to bring to the table is this opportunity to frame women in a different way, not only as beneficiaries or as stakeholders. Sometimes we think like, okay, let's consult them, let's bring them into the process of consultation and that's it. But we have to think further. And that would be a good opportunity to frame them as change agents, like as active participants, not passive, but active participants of these energy transition processes. Because as one of the most distinguished writers on gender and energy issues said, it's not a matter of changing from one energy matrix to another. It's not only a technical matter, it's also a social issue, because this is going to impact how things are organized, how society organizes. So I think that if we take into account that perspective, it's obvious that women will have to play a critical role into this transition if we want to really make it just and equitable. Otherwise, we will be losing a huge opportunity that I don't think that we will have this opportunity again in many, many years. So I would like to invite everyone that's watching this live, or that it's hearing our message, to think about women also in a perspective of change agents and active participants of this energy transition. Of course, there are a lot of things that we have to do to bring them on and to invite them to the discussions. And there's a lot of raising awareness campaigns that we have to do. There's a lot of education processes needed, but we have to frame them in a different way, not as passive, but as active and key players of this energy transition. So yeah, I will leave it here, but happy to answer some other questions.
Thank you, Sandra, and it's very important also that we postulate that women are agents of change, but then that we also provide evidence for that. And I believe there is a lot of evidence, lots of very capable and very involved women out there who show already what kind of a difference it makes when women are involved on a par with men in this very important societal change that the energy transition consists. Well, one of the issues that we I think need to talk about is the pervasive discrimination against women in many sectors of the labor market. And that's certainly the case also in sustainable energy. And often it's not a direct malign discrimination, but it's unconscious bias. It's a gender stereotyping that is very pervasive, that kind of sees women not fit for the field of sustainable energy. I want to turn to Rosa Pavanelli, if I may, and ask you about that difficult issue. What's your take on that? The gender stereotyping, the unconscious bias. What can be done? What should be done? Do we put too much weight on it or not enough weight on it? I mean, there are many sides to the question, obviously.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for inviting PSI to this very interesting debate. I would also take the opportunity to thank Mr. Almos Schlechner for introducing this debate, highlighting how much war and conflict can affect women and increase inequalities and injustice toward women. We saw that in Syria, we saw in Afghanistan, we saw in Libya, in Sudan, in all the places around the world where conflicts and war are affecting women. But I would like to add another aspect that is becoming clear, and it has already been raised in our discussion. We don't know how long we will pay the cost to a stop to just transition and to the fight to the climate crisis because of this war in Ukraine. Not only because we don't know how many carbon emissions the bombing on cities and people will produce. Nobody tell us this, but also because the reorganization of our energy needs at European level, one of the areas in the world that is consuming with high level of energy consumed will do and will produce, because there is already voices, rumors that maybe we need to resume to carbon in order to ensure the needs of our communities. And this will be a terrible approach. While we need to push to investing, researching, doing all effort possible to rethink the way we produce energy, but also the way we consume energy, which is fundamental for everyone, particularly for the richest countries. In terms of our work on gender, it's true. There's a sexual division of work that is often determined by bias, by prejudice, by habits, traditions also that have no reason to exist nowadays, particularly because if we need to be successful in a just transition, well, women who are 50% of the world population cannot be excluded. And we'd also consider that just transition is not just about how we provide energy, how we consume energy, and how we involve women on that. It's about a redefinition of our social relationship, our social contract that has to entail several aspects. This is why we, in our organization, PSI, which is the Global Union Federation of Public Service Workers in 154 countries, we are focusing on different aspects, training on the impact of climate change, raising the awareness so workers and women are aware of what is happening. We are working on proposing the idea of a social redistribution of care, not only because care are green jobs, but also because we want women and men to be part of this new social organization. And we want women to be able to access all jobs, also the jobs that are considered male-dominated, as we saw now. We raise awareness and we work particularly with women to make it clear how street connected are migration and climate change, and how much we need to approach this issue under different point of view, ensuring and fundamentally ensuring that energy is considered a fundamental human right, and energy dealt with as a common good that has to attract and be regulated by the responsibility of government. So this is, I would say, an holistic approach that we think has to be tackled. It's not just sufficient to say, hey, we want energy. We want energy, but we want a different definition of our society as well.
Thank you very, very much, Rosa. Yes, in the chat, we are all invited, you are all invited, dear participants, to drop your questions into the Q&A box, which you can access on your screen. We want to make this conversation as interactive as possible. And you have here as your counterparts, a wonderful group of experts bringing together very different perspectives. So please avail of that opportunity. Anna Victoria, you have raised your hand, please.
Thank you, Irene. Apologies, I forgot I have to unmute myself. I wanted to follow up on your question, because you were asking about the need to change stereotypes as one of the opportunities that we have for further increasing women's participation in the energy transition. And I think that this is one of the most important elements that we need to tackle. And it is a very complex topic, because we need to tackle this at very different levels. And again, it depends on where you are in this energy sector or value chain, and where you want to have the, to increase women's participation. Because if we see it from a very formal technical education point of view, we need to start developing those strategies that are going to help us, that at the level of primary school, to start debunking all of these stereotypes, to stopping talking about the fact that mathematics and engineering is more for boys than for girls, because there is no biological limitation to this. And there are studies that reflect that what happens is that girls are actually turned down, that their interests are not followed, just because they're having all this massive messaging just by the age of 6 years old. So we need to engage, if we're really want to be serious about increasing women's participation in the renewable energy sector, we need to rethink how we are dealing with the stereotypes at very early ages, and how perhaps, and unfortunately this is contrasense to what I'm talking, but it seems that women are feeling more in tune with renewable energy solutions, because it provides them with opportunities to solve a global problem. And this is also something very interesting that we may want to explore, in the sense that we can try and increase those programs that that expose girls and boys at early ages on how technology can be used, designed for social goods, and in order to increase benefits. And I guess the other element that would be very important, besides education, is to prepare the sector for receiving all of this, hopefully, new women that want to join the ranks of the energy sector. Because if we're only empowering women, if we're only giving them the tools, but we are not having these changes at the level of the utilities, at the private sector, and then they're faced with the same recruiting systems, in which is more mouth to mouth, where you get your first job, or where you're not tackling the human resources practices that will allow you to climb up the ladder, then we'll prepare them for the sector, but the sector will not be prepared for them, and they'll be set out. And if we're moving this into more grassroots content, I think it would be very important for us to really rethink how it is that we are approaching this new potential employees, and then how it is that we can see what are those skills either the women already have or that they're missing when contraposed to their male counterparts, and start working and investing in those leveling of skills so that they can join at the same level and then definitely benefit from these new jobs. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying is to fill these new opportunities and not taking off from others, but just making sure that this new opportunity that is there, that women are not going to be left behind. And I see a lot of hands coming up. So I think I'll stop here so that others can join in.
No, Anna Victoria, you see a lot of hands coming up, but you see also lots of nodding heads, I think. And there is this comment in the chat, in order to address gender stereotypes, yes, education is key, but please also have a look at the toys we give our children, you know, which harkens back to what was said before, that at the age of 6 years old already, you know, a lot of the gender stereotyping has been absorbed by young children, and things become complicated from that point on. Sandra, and then Linda, please. Sandra.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on what Anna just said, but I would also like to frame it as we have different levels where we have to ensure that things change for the benefit of women. Of course, there's the individual level, and it has to do with the skills and the education that women need to be better equipped to enter the energy sector and to comply with the requirements that the industry needs from them. But there's also this other level of institutions, organizations that, as Anna said, need to be prepared to receive those women. And it's not only a matter of opening doors and, okay, you are welcome and that's it. I'm not restricting anyone to come. No, we have to do more than that. The organizations need to be prepared in terms of gender, to be at least gender sensitive, but we are aiming to gender responsive or gender transformative institutions, but they should be at least gender sensitive, and they should have in place policies, processes, political will, resources, and all those things to really invite women and to make sure that they can enter an organization where they will feel respected, valued, and so forth. So I think that there are many changes that need to happen at the individual level. For example, at C4All, we are working to provide internship, mentorship, sponsorship, and technical training opportunities so far, because we believe that we need to equip women and to be the next generation of women leaders in the energy sector. But as well, the ecosystem needs to change. And it implies that whenever we have these new organizations coming to the energy sector, we can raise awareness on gender issues. They should have at least a basic set of knowledge regarding gender, you know, like what kind of discrimination practices they should avoid, safeguarding systems, accountability systems, and a lot of things like that, so that we can track progress and we can make sure that we are improving the sector, not only from women's perspective, but also from the ecosystem perspective. I will leave it there.
No, I think it's a very important point that you're making, because often at the end of a conversation around lack of equal participation, you know, the weight of the change is being put on individual women. You know, they need to work harder, they need to do better, they need to whatever. And it's simply not fair, because the system needs to change as well. But I think it's important also to, as you said, Sandra, to help women to get the skills they need, if they need to be reskilled or upskilled, whatever, to give them support in the form of mentorship, to start building networks among women, you know, to allow for the informal interaction that has been very effective and very successful in in the workplace for men for many years. Linda, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to expand the conversation around investment as well, right? So the amount of investment that, flows into women entrepreneurs, that is something that we need to look at very, very carefully. The data suggests that, a woman that looks like me, the amount of surprise that I am looking to raise millions of dollars to put up a biorefinery for clean, safe, affordable cooking fuel, right? It is probably expected that maybe $5,000, maybe $10,000. If I'm going completely crazy, maybe $20,000. So there is already bias that perhaps the project that I would bring forward, just from the way I look, would be one that is community-based, small and limited, right? And yet the problem that we're looking to solve, certainly in the clean cooking space, which obviously I'm very passionate about, is one of scale, right? So we cannot just concentrate on small scale community projects. We have to be able to understand that there are entrepreneurs with the capabilities that can absorb significant amounts of investments to bring the part of the solution, that this problem needs. And you don't have to you don't have to have a certain profile to be able to do a good entrepreneurial job. So looking at bias in every area, education, as we've talked about, jobs, but also who is getting that investment and why are they not getting that investment? And why is it surprising that a qualified individual who is also a woman is looking for investment at scale? Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, it's a recurring issue. The access for women to capital, to credit is very often much harder than for men. This was a topic that was already debated at the Beijing Women's Conference in 1995, and I happened to be there and chaired some negotiations. And it hasn't moved much. The whole issue hasn't moved much, even though we know that women pay back their credits even more reliably than often men, even though we have many case studies about women cooperatives and things like that at the village level that function perfectly well. It's very slow to move. Rosa, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, on this issue of bias and stereotype, I think it is also important. Education is crucial, is fundamental, and not just education for women, but also education for boys and men. As if we need to make a change, we need to make a change together. One thing that I consider important is not only the fact that we need to open the access to the labor market in all sectors, in all fields to women, but also that we need to fight the perpetuation of some areas where even education continue to be feminized. I'm thinking, for instance, to the area of children education, early age education, even, care sector where is predominantly female, even the education. That's something that we need to address, opening the training also to men and boys. And then I also think that being present can make the difference. We need to be there everywhere and anytime if we want to make a difference, because as soon as we leave a position or we do not, but I'm not talking in terms of leadership, of course it is in terms of leadership, but also in terms of participating. This is why I think on the issue of gender energy, democratic participation is a crucial issue. to leave the women the possibility to participate. I'm really sorry, but I have another meeting starting in 5 minutes with the UCLG, and I have to leave you, but my colleagues that are attending the meeting will stay with you until the end. And thank you so much for inviting me.
So thank you very much, Rosa, for being with us, and good luck for the other meeting. It's really amazing. There are, I think, 140 side events or so at CSW around the issue of climate change and gender. I mean, it just shows that the topic is really attracting attention. We have 2 questions in the chat, in the question and answer function. Please, I invite all the panelists to take a look and to start thinking who wants to reply to these questions. And in the meantime, I ask you to take the floor, Titi, please.
Oh, thank you. So a couple of days ago, we collected pictures of women in cooking. So most of the pictures is about cooking with woods, you know, because it is in the remote areas. And I posed the questions. What kind of energy for cooking women wants? The answer is the cheapest one. Because they are living in poverty. And if we ask those women, can you look for alternatives? They will only look at their around their place. And around their place, many communities, you know, they don't go to the forest, but they have their own energy garden. We know that system of energy garden in the indigenous communities. So in the whole discussion about energy, whether it is for cooking, maybe for electricity is a different thing. But the question is, it's actually fair if we put pressure to the grassroots indigenous women who are living in the poverty, and they look for the cheapest what available around them to change their way of energy source, you know. They are already, you know, things like that we need also to think.
Oh, so, it's clear from my perspective that it's not fair to put the burden of change on them. We cannot put the burden on change on the weakest members of our society, on the poorest, on the most exposed. That's for sure. That's why, as was said before, you know, the energy transition is really also about changing the social contract. It's about making sure that there is an increase in not just sustainability, but also an increase in social justice. And that's that has to do with addressing severe poverty, that has to do with overcoming exclusion, that has to do with finding new solutions to the everyday needs of people everywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah, agree with that. So therefore, I agree with all what your talk before, that we need at the social issue, you know, we need to look at the gender injustices that is now faced by the women. No information, not in the decision-making processes, and they have to deal with the whole new and clean energy projects and policy that come to the area and then trigger land grabbing, resource grabbing, and so on. So we need to look in a more comprehensive way where the women live, you know, and it is, so energy transition is not only, you know, take away the source of energy from fossil fuel and giving it to solar and other things, but it's really need to have a paradigm change, you know, from the decision makers and all of us, you know, and also paradigm change because the women also need, you know, a lot of, I think they have already their own alternatives from their localities. We just don't talk with them, so we don't know what is their alternative. Yeah. So therefore, it is important to talk with them in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I know that Ana Victoria has her hand up, and I will, of course, give you the floor. But I would also like to start to steer the conversation a little bit into the direction of the second topic that we want to address. I think we have taken stock of the diversity and the severity of the problem, which is underrepresentation of women in sustainable energy, which is exclusion of women, especially of grassroots women, from the decision-making processes because of all kinds of reasons, including severe poverty, gender stereotyping, and so forth. But we also want to focus on what is being done already, what can we see as being done already to better the situation, and what are some of the proposals that we have to better the situation, to improve the situation. Ana Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene. And just very quickly to react to Titi's comment, I mean, what she's explaining is one of those unfortunate practices that happen when one comes into a community with a particular technology in mind, but never has taken the opportunity to actually talk to this community and figure out what are the needs and what are their capabilities. And that is one of the reasons why one would argue that you cannot roll out any kind of energy project or development project whatsoever without having at least a gender approach or a human rights-based approach that would force your methodology to actually recognize those people that you will serve. And this is where I wanted to make also the connection to what you were suggesting and moving into the policy part. And that's IUCN's gender department published several years back a report called Energizing Equality. The report looked at 192 different energy policy frameworks worldwide and did an assessment of how women or gender equality was being taken up into these frameworks. Interestingly enough, looking into what has been done, 30% of those, close to 30%, actually were addressing gender equality in one way or the other. But perhaps the most interesting finding that we had is that 6 of those frameworks were actually recognizing energy access as a human right. And these countries then are using that entry point into gender, into human rights to ensure not only access, but then you can also spread that into having national legislation that's going to enforce that whatever kind of project is going to take into account the needs of those women and men on the ground. And this may be particularly important to large energy infrastructure in which you are not only providing a service, but you may have to deal with mobilization of communities. You need to ensure that their rights are preserved, that if there are indigenous people, communities on the ground, that they have also been informed and been part of the decision-making process. So I think from a legal perspective, there is much that one can do when looking at the energy frameworks and start tweaking them if they're not, if there's conditions are not there, or taking advantage of the existence of this legal frameworks and then moving into implementation, as has been in some of these countries. And if time's allowed, I'm happy to share more examples, but I see that there also, at least Sandra has her hands up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ana Victoria, for making this very important point about the relevance of the human rights approach to move us to a better situation. Sandra, you had in a previous intervention, you had pointed out also to the need. You had pointed out the need to work on the skills that women need, and the skills that the industry is asking for, and where there sometimes is a mismatch between the skills the women have and the skills the industry is asking for. How can we go about these things, and what kind of initiatives do you see can be successful to promote women's empowerment in the clean energy space?
Thank you, Irene. Well, at C4All, we believe that there are powerful tools to empower women, and one of these powerful tools could be mentoring, because we need to provide women with role models and, like this kind of peer-to-peer networking and engagement, so that they can feel better equipped to enter the energy sector. So we provide mentorship. Actually, we have now launched our second cohort for the Women in Clean Cooking Mentoring Program, in partnership with GWNet and with the Clean Cooking Alliance, in fact. So we are inviting all of you to apply and to become a participant of this program, Women in Clean Cooking. It's the name of the initiative. And this is a call open for African and Asian countries. So please feel welcome to apply. You will find all the information on our web page and social media. And also, we believe that another important and powerful tool to promote women's empowerment is technical training. And we have developed a new partnership with the Enel Foundation to bring together a program that it's called Open Africa Power, which is a technical training program to prepare the next generation of African leaders in the energy sector. So this is open. This has a strong focus on gender issues, but also it's open for male and female participants, because we have seen that it's also important to take intersectionality into account. So we face challenges not only because we are women, but we face challenges, specific challenges when we are young or coming from certain societies. So we are trying to tackle as well these intersectionalities issues with programs such as Open Africa Power, which is open for all African countries as well. It's now open, the application is open. So we are in the process of choosing the participants, and we will champion the 150 next generation leaders to be equipped with top-notch knowledge, and we will provide technical assistance and technical knowledge on how to navigate this energy transition in the best way possible. So I would say that there are a lot of other initiatives that are good practices being carried out by other actors, but at least at C4All, we take gender equality as a very important, as a core value of our work. So what we are trying to do is to mainstream gender across all of our programs, but also having a dedicated program, which is women and youth at the forefront, where we have this kind of initiatives such as the mentoring and the technical training that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for sharing that very, very impressive work that your organization is doing. Now, shall we try to answer some of the questions that have come to us? The first question is from Japan. I have a question from Japan, where we had big earthquakes and a tsunami in 2011. So on behalf of women in Japan, how can we access or be able to produce local safe energy while we are not expert of energy production? If you have any ideas, we would appreciate it. And then there's another question: what role could international environmental law play in achieving more gender equality in this area? And finally, there is a question on the role of gas as an energy source to transition to carbon neutrality in cooking? Would it not be more effective to directly invest in off-grid green electricity? Gas seems to prolong dependency geopolitically, but also to male-led large-scale energy businesses. Any of the panelists who wish to reply to one or the other of these questions?
I can quickly take the last one. I 100% agree. Yes, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, is a popular alternative for energy, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, that you're absolutely right, is susceptible to geopolitics. And we are living that reality. You know, the price of gas has more than doubled in the last 6 weeks. You know, okay, there are other policies that we have put in place, and I speak specifically for my country of Kenya, such as introducing VAT on cooking gas, but also the geopolitics that you refer to has an issue. So yes, it is not a perfect solution, and you're 100% right. When you're talking about storage tanks, when you're talking about refilling stations, when you're talking about gas stations, then that synonymity with a man's business definitely comes to mind. So I 100% agree with the question that yes, we can look at liquid petroleum gas as a transitional fuel as we are coming up with true clean carbon neutral, you know, net zero fuel. So very, very important comment. And the comment I want to say to help answer the question that has been posed before us is, you know, I recently looked at the policy landscape in Kenya around cooking, right? And certainly for my country, my conclusion is this: the policies are there, if only we implemented them. And if we looked at global policies, let's start there, SE for all, Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at net zero, the Paris Agreement, we have everything done on paper, right? Kenya's gone a step further to look at the gender role of women in energy. We actually have a policy around that. So in my view, if the global policies, if the policies that are in place, even without necessarily calling out women, women will have an opportunity because the scale is massive. We cannot leave out 50% of the population and expect to have to achieve sustainable energy for all, right? Yet, I would say, following the example of my country, Kenya, and actually have a gender and women policy is a step in the right direction. But by golly, we have the policies in place for energy, clean energy, certainly addressing the issue of climate change. So that is my contribution. Let us enforce even 50% of the policies we have in place, and we will be making progress in that area.
So we need to strengthen implementation and we need to strengthen monitoring, right, of implementation. Absolutely. For sure.
Absolutely, and tracking, you know, the gender disaggregated data, all that. We need
better data probably also, because data are usually quite scarce, especially when it comes to disaggregated data. Titi, you have your hand up, please.
Yeah, so I want to try to answer for the question from Japan, because we're also living in the earthquake and tsunami prone areas. So, but you know, I believe in localities. So I believe also in local women's initiatives, rather than a general solution of the problems, because then sometimes it's not fixed to the needs of the local people. So I think my suggestion would be that, you know, have a local women discussions about the energy that they need and what they can tap from their own resources. So sometimes in other places, when we remember our work together with the communities, we can ask the help from the students by having a competition, you know, competitions of finding new energy sources for cooking, healthy, and whatever you want within their own communities. And I believe there will be a lot of ideas that you can develop. That's just only my suggestion, because of that, you know, locality is very important in these things. And the second one is about the international environmental law. We just did a review of national climate policy and cities climate policies in Indonesia. And we found out that why women is not in the decision-making processes, because an important policy at national level is not applied, which is gender mainstreaming policy. There is a gender mainstreaming policy that agreed, it is derived from the Beijing Declaration and agreed by the ECOSOC and adopted by many governments, including my governments in Indonesia, but then it's not implemented. So implementations of good policies that can support women in the decision making, that can analyze the gender injustices, is actually important. The policies there, we need to really push our governments to apply it as already good defined. That's my answer for Annabelle, and then from Japan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Titi. Actually, we are coming close to having to wrap up this conversation. So I would like to open a round of last comments from the panelists. And I would like to ask you to do it around really the question of what is the one thing that you would really want to see happening now, or in a very short time framework, in order to make progress on the nexus between SDG 5 and SDG 7, in order to make progress in creating a level playing field for women in sustainable energy, allowing them to contribute fully with all their life experience and all their innovation capacity to this major societal task that an energy transition entails. And Ana Victoria, you had your hand up, so I'll give you the floor. Please make your previous point, but make it very succinctly, and then start with the final comment.
I'll do my best. Not so sure what my final comment would be, but just listening to Titi, one of the things that came to mind with the question from Japan are at least two experiences of women coming together in the form of cooperatives, one in Sweden and another in Germany. The names are escaping me, but this is another way of coming together. And you have a problem, you want to invest in energy, in renewable energy, you create a cooperative, and then you start thinking out what could be the best, most appropriate technology, as Titi was saying. And not sure if this will be my last comment, but thinking about international environmental law, it's very interesting to see that it's not only the UNFCCC that has gender mandates and a gender action plan since the COP in Lima, but actually also the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Convention to Combat Desertification, Ramsar, which is the convention that oversees wetlands. They all also have gender strategies, gender action plans. So from an international environmental law perspective, it would be very interesting to start seeing what kind of framework could be produced to help actually countries to be more coherent at national level in their implementation. And my wish further down the line, I think, would be the coherence to see that we cannot move forward with our development, being sustainable, being green, unless we actually do our best to make sure that we engage the 100% of the population so that they can make the most out of their human capital and live the life to the best of their capabilities. And that is for me the investment, an investment in opening up opportunities and dismantling the stereotypes that are holding several people back. And with that, thank you very much for your words, for the time.
Thank you very much, Anna Victoria. Sandra, would you like to go next with your closing remarks?
Yeah, my closing message would be, what I would like to see two things, actually. First, it would be coordination among stakeholders. There are some institutions or organizations that have been working on the gender and energy nexus for years, and they have a lot of lessons learned and knowledge regarding this issue. So I would love to see how this knowledge fits into, like new stakeholders and how they can be coordinated. I think that a great opportunity for that is the Gender and Energy Compact, that I would invite the people that's watching us to read the Gender and Energy Compact. I think that's a great opportunity to start working on these issues. So I would love to see lots of commitments coming from the compact happening right now. And another thing that I would love to see is that we actually can convince the other stakeholders to work on gender issues, because it is a human right, and not only because it's fancy right now and it's marketing and it's social responsibility. There's a great risk to start, as we have greenwashing, there's a risk of purple washing or pink washing, in terms of gender. So I would love to see that this is a real change and not only something that we are doing because now it's fancy to do. So I would invite everyone to join the Gender and Energy Compact and to start working from there.
Thank you, Sandra. Titi, could I ask you for your final comment?
Yes, sure. What I want to see is actually a rigorous leadership building for grassroots women, not only the mature women, but also young women. So about gender, climate change, energy transitions. So they can be encouraged to determine for themselves and by themselves about energy sources that they want to have, that they want to develop, and what kind of transition process they want to go through based on their needs and based on their localities.
Thank you very much, Titi. Linda, your closing wish.
Absolutely. I'm going to just repeat myself that I would love to see implementation of what we have in the books already. I'm really happy Sandra talked about the Energy Compact. That is some of the elegant documents that every country has put together to say, how are you going to achieve universal access to clean energy? We have these documents, we are not implementing them. So I would love to see a serious effort towards implementing what is already existing.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to turn to you, Maritza, and invite you for your closing statements. Maritza Chan, Deputy Permanent Representative of Costa Rica here in New York at the United Nations mission. Please, you have the floor.
It is with great pride that Costa Rica co-sponsored this event together with the permanent missions of Austria and Germany. We commend the Global Initiative for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and our speakers, Ana, Costa Rica, Linda, Sandra, and Titi, for your insightful presentations. Women are often responsible for gathering producing food, collecting water, and sourcing fuel for heating, as Ana told us today, and cooking, as Linda told us. 80% of women displaced by climate change, 80% of people displaced by climate change are women, and women die from disaster events, among other factors, because of extreme weather events have greater impact on the poor, and 70% of the world's poor are women. However, we heard today that women are not only victims, women are agents of change, active participants. They're leading social and environmental movements. We need, as Karin told us today, all perspectives, ideas, and talents when it comes to this transition. We must ensure that no one is left behind, but also we must ensure equal participation in this transition. However, the inclusion of women is not about making physical space for women or making sure that there are enough women in the room. It's about democratizing and reframing the discourse around women and creating spaces that are truly capable of honoring our different roles, experiences, and contribution to society. There are two main ideas that came out from today's discussion. First, that as Rosa told us, our plans and programs must consider a just transition in the transformation sectors of the economy and in the use of digitalization and innovation so the post-COVID future is brighter, more just, inclusive, and peaceful. And as told us that they must be carried out under a comprehensive strategic considerations with a focus on human rights and gender equality, which guarantee respect for diversity and the promotion of inclusion. This is not a technical matter, but a social issue, Sandra told us. She also told us that energy is a human right, and we must revise our social contract and debunk, as Anna told us, the stereotypes around women. At the national level, climate action policies, programs, and projects must be designed with differentiated approaches with disaggregated indicators that allow us to measure the participation and impact of these groups. What is not measured is unseen. So measuring this contribution of women and how they are impacted by climate change is crucial. Going back to the idea of women, youth, grassroots movements, indigenous peoples, and other groups as agents of change, they should lead a specific process related to energy transformation and independence to rescue the cities and promote sustainable mobility. Another important point that came out from the discussion is that at the international level, and we commend Germany for leading and putting energy as one of their priorities during its presidency of the G7, but also we need more funding and better targeting of flows towards investments that preserve nature rather than destroy it, with people-led approaches to conservation through indigenous and local communities, and especially empowering women and youth to combat inequalities. In the case of Costa Rica, I'm very happy to tell you that Costa Rica and Denmark launched an alliance called Beyond Oil and Gas, BOGA, within the framework of the high-level dialogue on energy, in a context where a growing number of countries and other jurisdictions are taking steps to end new oil and gas exploration and extraction. This is a plan for a fair, equitable, and managed phase out of existing oil and gas production. As members and friends of the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, we support a socially just and equitable global transition to oil and gas production that ensures the equal and meaningful participation of women. Costa Rica is committed to continue promoting the incorporation of human rights and gender approach to multilateral processes, especially environmental conventions, and to articulate an innovative national processes that operationalize these approaches, promoting the structures such as the Citizen Advisory Council on Climate Change 5C, where several of these groups are represented. We look forward to working with you, with all parties, to promote these principles. And let me close with telling you what Linda told us. We have the policies in place. If we only enforce 50% of them, we will see a change. Let's translate words into action. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Maritza. Thank you for very inspiring closing words, and also for a wonderful summary of so many of the salient points of our conversation. I believe we had a very rich and important conversation. Obviously, this is a topic that can be explored from many different angles and for many, many hours and weeks and months. But at the same time, as was pointed out, we have enough commitments on the books to move forward, and we have the means to start moving forward. And I'm filled with hope and with confidence, and also with renewed passion that together we can actually make a difference. So I would like to thank you all for being here with us, for sharing your insights, and for thinking together about a better way of doing the energy transitions by making them more participatory and more inclusive, by drawing on the diverse talent of everybody, women and men alike. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to close this side event.
Thank you. Thank you.